The problem is that stuff, that part of our brain, the part that thinks things through, is the last part you want to be talking to when you're trying to build an engagement system or sell somebody something. Nobody wants to sell to the slow thinking brain. They want to sell to the fast thinking brain. No one wants to try to get engagement with the slow thinking brain. They're going to get engagement with the fast thinking brain. And so the profit motive, as with everything, I'm sure you feel this way as well, is like the technology itself is not the problem. It is how it is deployed in the incentive structure that is built around it. And the incentive structure is just built to play on our unconscious choices whenever it can. And that's where I think we're going to get into trouble.
Yeah. Sam Altman talks a little bit, and others talk about it, but the concept of like super persuasion, like,
yes.
That we will have the AI models capable of a level of persuasion that humans have never come across. So it's sort of like, imagine the most persuasive human that ever existed. And then there's a thing that's just floors above it, maybe with a human controlling it, maybe, right? I mean, why would you want that person in charge if it's slowing the persuasion down, right? Is I think what your average marketer would say. And one of the things that my, decade plus now of looking at this topic have taught me is like, I went into this thinking, well, there's got to be stuff about human beings that can't be analyzed and simulated by these systems, right? There are clearly ineffable human qualities that can't be replaced by something like AI. And to be honest with you, I haven't found much that can't be in some way vacuumed right up and spit out back at us for entertainment and profit, that isn't going to work. We're already seeing, my dad, who's a very shrewd consumer of media, totally fell for a piece of AI, like blues music, a whole album's worth of this stuff, and he's like, what an incredible performer this guy is, and then it took him a week or so to be like, wait a minute, and it spoke. It was not a singer playing guitar, so maybe not there yet. But there was a piece of music going around for a while called "How Do I Start an F-16?" It was like a sea shanty style song, but it gives you the technical instructions on how to start an F-16. It rhymes, it's hilarious, and it's catchy as hell. And it's like it blew up on TikTok, and that's because these systems can absolutely simulate stuff that really speaks to us. And I was just at a conference at Stanford of a bunch of trust and safety people who were the content moderators at the big social media companies back when they had those people, and they were doing all kinds of scary presentations on what AI is going to make possible. And one of the number one, one of the posters out in the courtyard that scared the bejesus out of me was, here is politically persuasive messaging when written by a human versus when written by a piece of AI. And the AI is always better. It's always better, So yeah, this like perfectly persuasive system. And the thing is, like, the way our society works and the way capitalism works, we are not inherently hostile to persuasion. If you're getting, and in the same way that we're not inherently, hostile to addiction, we like it if we are addicted to Peloton. They think of that as a social good, right? And so the tools themselves are never going to be regulated on the basis of just being persuasive, and yet we don't have a good framework in this country for drawing the line between, positive persuasion and negative persuasion. We like to think it's all going to get sorted out in the free market. And so I just think we're not sort of built as a society to grapple with this fully. Just to that one point about political persuasion, do you think the starting gun has already gone off, and that, campaigns are having AIs do their messaging, and that like a campaign in 2026 that didn't have AI do their messaging would be in a vulnerable position to one that did already?
Oh, yeah. I think it's absolutely, the starting gun has definitely gone off, right? We already saw in the 2024 election, whether the Trump campaign directly did this is still being investigated, but there are all sorts of people who supporters of the campaign who were putting out tons and tons of AI imagery showing, President Trump alongside absolutely invented, fictitious, African-American women supporters, and Swifties for Trump. There was a whole thing going around, memes going around of as if Taylor Swift fans were somehow for Trump, and so all of that was happening. At one point, one anecdote I keep coming back to is during the Biden administration, there was you remember the big floods that took place in Nashville, and Republicans at the time were beating up the Biden administration for what they saw as a poor response to that. And at one point, a photo started making the rounds of this like cute little girl drenched by floodwaters, shivering in a boat carrying a little puppy with a life preserver on. And it was posted by all these conservative politicians. And then it was, of course, pointed out to them, this is an AI generated thing. And so a lot of them just took it down without comment. But in one prominent example, a spokesperson for the RNC said, y'all, I know this has been shown to be AI, but I'm leaving it up anyway, because it clearly depicts something that we know is going on in the real world. And so the emotions of this are real, basically. And I think that's the other thing. It's like we're entering this world where already, right, the social media information bubble that was already a problem, in which people were, everybody of one persuasion is sort of grouped together and all made to feel that persuasion is the only one that counts.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be even more intense a version of that, a one-on-one kind of information bubble that's going to confirm everyone's biases over and over and over again. And so the power of that, I think, is not to be underestimated.
This is just an interesting little narrow band here that I want to stay in for just a second. Are your concerns greater that humans will abuse this, or do you have concerns that, in a either moderate or full loss of control scenario, that the models themselves would be employing the super persuasion for their own ends? Is it? Yeah. What's your perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think that, whether it's a failure of imagination on my part or just a psychological inability to grapple with the whole concept of basically of your podcast, right? Of existential risk. Like I think I just can't handle that. And so I spend a lot of my time thinking about more pedestrian stuff like effects on kids and effects on jobs and effects on bias and that kind of stuff. But I would say that one of the problems we have right now is I look at a couple of things as a real problem when it comes to the human-made AI systems that we are currently commercializing. One is the fashion for wanting to build general purpose systems rather than very specific AI systems, right? The whole notion of AGI, artificial general intelligence, is a response to what had been these very narrow use cases in which you built a system that was only good at playing, a certain kind of video game, or only good at, flying a drone through an unfamiliar environment. And that narrow use of AI fell out of fashion and became, because clearly it was going to be much harder to build at scale and much less marketable at scale. And so this idea of an all-in-one thing that can tell you how to, do cardiac surgery and how to do your homework is a more appealing product to the investment community than these very, very narrow things. And so that has set us up, I think, for a world in which you're centralizing a huge amount of learning into one system rather than a bifurcated set of systems that in theory, I'd be much less concerned about the worries that you've talked about so capably on this show. If it was just a thing that operates robots or just a thing that operates, surgical equipment, right? I wouldn't be as worried about that thing, acquiring the wrong ideas, right?
Yeah.
What I know from the technical people I speak to here in Silicon Valley is that the vast majority of them are very dubious that we are even on the path towards some kind of super intelligent, sentient being.